Welcome everyone to the SCR Connections July webinar. Thank you all for joining us. It is my pleasure today to introduce our guest speaker, Derrick Newby. Derrick is the Prevention Specialist at the University of Arkansas at Little Rock MidSOUTH Center for Prevention and Training. For the past 20 years, Derrick has worked in both the private and public sectors in fields affecting public health, family enrichment, community development, and prevention. He graduated from the University of Arkansas at Pine Bluff with a degree in psychology in 1999 and the University of Arkansas at Little Rock in 2004 with a master's degree in public administration with a focus on nonprofit management. He served as the vice chairman on the Communities Against Drugs Coalition in Pine Bluff, Arkansas for 2 years, and he is a certified Cultural Competency trainer and a certified suicide prevention counselor. We're very excited to have him present his presentation, Cultural Competencies and the Strategic Prevention Framework. I'm going to go ahead and pass the ball over to Derrick and let him get started. Good morning, Derrick.
Good morning. Am I unmuted?
You are. We can hear you loud and clear.
Okay. I've done several webinars on this topic, and that's always an important question to ask before you start delivering your information. I want to welcome each and every person here today. We have a few limitations because we're in a webinar, and I generally like to do this class in person. Cultural competency is near and dear to my heart, and of course the strategic prevention framework is what drives a lot of the work that's being done right now in prevention. And knowing how they work together and the importance of both is going to be extremely important in being successful and also in working with others in this field. The purpose of our training today is to help you identify the correct definitions and keywords when working in prevention and understanding cultural competency, and also to understand the link between the two. Also, you'll have the opportunity to demonstrate an understanding of cultural differences and behaviors and attitudes and beliefs, and also understand that assumptions can lead to stereotypes and unfair judgments about individuals and groups. So it involves some insight and also some understanding and soul searching in this class as well. You also will be able to identify appropriate communication skills and strategies to meet the cultural and linguistic challenges in this changing world that we work in today. And by the completion of this presentation, you will be able to discuss the strengths and power of diversity in prevention efforts. I ask that each and every person be willing to participate. There will be opportunities for you to chime in. I'll ask you to enter a response on the chat line. And if you could agree to do so, could you please type in yes in your chat box right now so I can make sure everyone's chat box is working and you know how to use it. Okay. So this is the Strategic Prevention Framework. I'm sure many of you have seen this before. If you have seen this and had the opportunity to work with it, you understand how vital it is as a tool and how it helps guide us in the things that we do. SAMHSA's Strategic Prevention Framework is a planning process, and it's for preventing substance use and misuse. The 5 steps and 2 guiding principles of the Strategic Prevention Framework, or we like to call it the SPIF, SPF, offer a prevention professional a comprehensive process for addressing the substance misuse and related behavioral health problems facing their communities. A critical element of having the capacity to conduct the 5 SPIF steps successfully is knowing your current capacity. You need to know what's going on within your community and the community that you want to serve. The role of cultural competency, as you can see right in the middle, is not an add-on to the process, but rather something that needs to be considered at each and every step, and that's why we have it at the center. So, what is prevention? For a working definition and how we'll be talking about it today, we understand that it's the action of stopping something from happening or arising. So, in relation to alcohol, tobacco, and other drugs, Prevention is the promotion of constructive lifestyles and norms that discourage those types of behaviors. It is proactive. You have to empower individuals, you have to empower the community, and you have to face the challenges that people are dealing with within those communities and transition throughout the lifespan by creating and reinforcing conditions that promote healthy behaviors and healthy lifestyles. And that includes changing environment as well as education to individuals. So prevention requires a multiple processes that involve people in a proactive effort because you want to protect, enhance, and restore the health and well-being of individuals in their community. It is always better if people never use alcohol, tobacco, or other drugs. And the likelihood, and the longer we can prolong that behavior, the more likely we are that the behavior won't pop up at a later stage in life. So that's why there's a lot of education that's focused on youth. But also, when there is substance abuse and use within the communities, we can also help people to restore the community. A lot of communities that we work in and live in, you notice they were inundated with tobacco before. But through different laws and processes of the communities, we were able to change the environments. I was born in 1971, so luckily I didn't have the opportunity to fly on a plane when people were smoking, but I noticed the signs that were up, and I know at some point in time it was the norm for people to smoke on airplanes. Since then, things have changed, and it has been prevented, and now it is no longer even considered an option when people are flying on a plane. They don't even think about it anymore. So prevention works, and it takes the community coming together to work together in order to make sure that they can make changes that are going to be effective over time, or in other words, sustainable changes. Prevention is based on the understanding that there are factors that vary among individuals as well, and that's where the cultural competency comes into play. Although we share a lot of similarities within smaller communities, there are differences, and in working with different communities, then you have to understand what those differences are in order to be effective in working with different groups. So what is diversity? Diversity includes important and interrelated dimensions of human identity, such as race, ethnicity, gender, gender identity, and expressions, as well as the other things that I have listed here on this slide. So when you think about diversity, you have to have a broad spectrum in range and understand that diversity means many different things to many different people. A lot of times in working with groups and community action groups within my community, we have to look at the people that we want to serve, and we also look at who is on our board or the group that has come together in order to make the change. So it doesn't matter that everyone necessarily looks different. When you talk about diversity, you have to consider all these things. Some groups may all look the same as far as people-wise, but they may still have diversity within them. They could have religious diversities, different religions. They could have political affiliation diversity, bringing a group together of Republicans and Democrats. They could have different abilities and disabilities. If you're talking about providing services to a community or improving access for the disabled, it would be important to have people who are disabled on your group and on your planning group as well. And also, those are the people that you want to be the gatekeepers and that you want to talk to if things are going to be affecting that population. So when we talk about demographics, let's look at the U.S. because that's where we are currently right now. The U.S. is becoming increasingly diverse, whereas hundreds of years ago, it was easy to be able to pinpoint what the diverse populations look like within the state or within this country. Now it is increasingly changing. And diversity means that different cultures operating in our communities and neighborhoods as well. The youth and families we work with represent an amazing array now of diversity and cultural richness, and it is importantly and increasingly importantly for us to understand what those differences are so that we can meet the challenges that people may have on an individual level as well as on a group level. So, linguistic diversity. About 14% of the U.S. population now speaks a language other than English at home. That's important for teachers to understand as these youth are going to school and learning and maybe given things such as homework to just take home and have your parents help you with them. If the parents don't speak English as a first language, then that student may have essentially like not the same opportunity as other students who have parents to help them. They could be first generation or second generation immigrants, and their parents don't necessarily speak English, and that homework is not sent home in their native language, then that parent may not be able to help that student. About 54% of the students that we're talking about, or people in the United States, speak Spanish. Although Spanish is offered as a second language within the schools, it's important now for even teachers, librarians, and law enforcement to not only know key words within Spanish, but to take some time and to learn Spanish as a language so that they will be equipped in the future to communicate better with the populations they serve. The U.S. is becoming a multicultural society, and that is why cultural diversity is an important issue right now. By 2040, no race will make up a majority. And that's an interesting change. It's a big change. By 2050, the U.S. African American population will increase from 13 to 14%. The Hispanic population will increase from 14 to 25%. And the Asian population will increase from 3% to 8%. At the same time, simultaneously, the Caucasian population will decrease from 74% to 50%. Does that mean that people of the Caucasian are leaving the United States? No. Increasingly, people now have the opportunity to clearly report how they see themselves, whereas before it was limited. Applications, the census was pretty much limited to Black or white or Hispanic. And now people are able to come from other countries and identify themselves more clearly, and now we understand that and because of that, the Caucasian population is estimated to decrease. I don't see any questions, but if there are any, please feel free to share those with me. So, cultural diversity is also an important issue because persons with physical and mental challenges comprise the largest minority in the U.S., with approximately 50 million individuals and almost 20% of the population. About 25 million Americans identify as gay, lesbian, bisexual, or transgender. These are some definitions. We're going to talk about them that are very apparent in applications, and you'll see even now as you register for different events, if you apply for grants, these are questions that they ask, and they're about race and ethnicity. The term race refers to the concept of dividing people into populations or groups on the basis of various sets of physical characteristics, which usually result from genetic ancestry. Race presumes shared biological genetic traits, whether actual or asserted. And in the early 19th century, racial differences were ascribed significance in areas of intelligence, health, and personality. There was not, and there is no evidence now validating these ideas. Yet this practice continues to shape the way some people think, and we must challenge it constantly and consistently. Race and races are assumed to be distinguished by skin color, facial type, etc. However, the scientific basis of racial discrimination is very weak. Now, our next definition, ethnicity, on the other hand, connotes shared cultural traits as a shared group history. So some ethnic groups also share linguistic or religious traits, while others share a common group history, but not a common language or religion. It is important to note that ethnicity is defined in terms of shared genealogy, whether actual or presumed in some cases. Sometimes people don't know exactly where they came from, but because they look a certain way, they assume that that is where their ancestry originated. Typically, if people believe they descend from a particular group, though, and they want to be associated with that group, then they are in fact members of that group. And it's increasingly now normal for them to report as such. Racism, another commonly used term. It is simply the belief that race is the primary determinant of human traits. But as we've already discussed, it is not. It does not determine a person's capacities and their racial differences produced by inherent superiority of a particular race. But sexism occurs as well, and that is the belief in the inherent superiority of one sex over another, and thereby the right to be dominant. And we're still seeing things, examples of this even in recent years, where in Saudi Arabia, women recently were granted the right to drive. This is 2018, and we're still seeing changes just occurring now. So, once again, one of the things that we have to do is be aware of these things and reach out and speak out so that we can change them. If you belong to a certain community action group, the male and female should have the equal opportunity to make changes within the group and to make standards and also equal votes. Anytime you see something that's going on that appears to be sexism, you have to call it out so that we can make the change. Homophobia. Homophobia is the fear or hatred or aversion to or prejudice and or discrimination against people who are homosexual. The homosexual or homophobia extends not only to males who are loving males, but to the whole LGBTQ and community. And we have to be aware of that when we see things happen or policies in place. We have to try and change those things. I'm in Arkansas currently right now, and I try to help at different levels to fight against homophobia, especially when it comes to discrimination, because it is still a work at will state here in Arkansas, and there are other states that are that way as well, employer at will, meaning that if someone wanted to fire someone because they didn't like their particular way of loving, for lack of better words, then they could essentially just fire that person without any repercussion at all. And with the status being that way, it's even more important that people are aware of it and they stand up and they make changes. So, when we talk about culture now, culture is considered a central concept not only in today's modern society, but also in common sciences like anthropology as well. It encompasses the range of phenomena that are transmitted through social learning in human societies. Libraries are a very good example of that. Through libraries, people are able to share stories from generation to generation. people write books about their experiences, and people from the next generation have the opportunity to research and learn about human society over time. Some aspects of human behavior, social practices such as culture, expressive forms such as art, music, dance, rituals, and religions, and even technology such as tool usage or cooking or shelter and clothing are said to be culturally universal, in essence found in all human societies. And in the travels that I've had, and I've had the opportunity to visit Europe and also the Caribbean and Korea, it seems to me that although we are people of different places, we all find different ways to do the same things. But culture helps form our identity because of our connection that we have with our parents and our grandparents, and the values that have been established and the customs that we see and practice on a regular basis. It helps shape our understanding and our perception of the world. It also helps us organize our physical and social interactions. What are the norms? We learn the norms generally, first of all, in our homes. Turn-taking behavior, for instance, or eye contact. If the norms in the household are to not make direct eye contact, as it was when I was growing up, it was considered disrespectful to look at our parents in the eye. If we looked them directly in the eye, it was considered confrontational and as if we were somehow trying to be aggressive. So I learned not to do so. I didn't find out till I was about 30 years old that my grandmother had gray eyes, because I had never directly stared in my grandmother's eyes because I didn't want to be disrespectful. But as I learned more, and she's 88 years old now, and we talk about it, we laugh because she does acknowledge that she came from a different time and that it was truly what she believed to be true then. But as times have changed now, the norms have changed, and we have become more assimilated to the mainstream community, where that behavior is not necessarily looked upon or frowned upon as being bad. My children have a wonderful relationship with their great-grandmother, and they ask her about the history of the family, and she talks to them, and that's a learning process. So she's helping to expand the culture of our family by sharing that knowledge, and they see how her behaviors and the things that she values and is transmitted down from generation to generation. So it's extremely valuable. So why does culture matter? Culture matters for the same reasons that I just talked about and even more. Parenting, communication, just learning body language. Culture also matters because of perception of time and understanding perception of time. In my culture, when I was growing up, my parents told me that if I was on time, I was late, and that became a part of who I was, and essentially it transferred on to how I taught my children as well. There are other families, communities, where they call it, when I travel to the Caribbean, they call it being on Caribbean time. But the people there are not necessarily offended if you're not on time. And in fact, they're not often on time. And you can't be offended by that as well if you understand the culture there. It affects help-seeking behavior. It also helps the use of services within support communities. We can provide the best services and the prevention services within a community, but if we don't understand the culture of that community and how they feel about the utilization of services, then we may have our doors open, but no one coming in to access those services. It also helps with understanding the government systems. Right now, we have a lot of conflicts within the community with law enforcement, and it's because certain communities aren't necessarily educated to trust law enforcement officials, or they see them as being a negative impact having negative impact within the community, and they don't build the trust. And you have other law enforcement agencies who are working harder to build trust within communities so that they can change that attitude. And improve the relationships they have within the community. Culture also affects how we see the world. When we talk about my traveling around, I think about often when I go places, if I was to name someone, or what do you call the people from France? People would say, well, they're French. And what do you call the people from Germany? And they would be Germans. But what do you think those people call us here living in the United States? Well, we're the Americans. And to the world, they see us as all Americans. From their cultural eyes, we are all the same. But from our eyes, and being here in the United States, we know that there are many subcultures, and we are just as diverse from the Chicagoans to the New Orleans to those people from California, or I could go on and on. As many different states we have, even within those states, there are different subcultures that go on from the north to the south, east, and west. So, understanding those cultural differences will ultimately help us be successful in prevention efforts and also in building relationships. The family is defined differently by different cultures. So essentially when you're talking about doing family programs or improving families, that you need to know exactly what families, how they're defined by the different cultures, so to ensure that everyone will be served. Some cultural groups also stress the generation of ancestors. In the Native American community, when I worked for the AIDS Education Training Center for the Southeast region, we had a lot of education in that area trying to increase access to services for Native American ancestors or Native American Indians living in those areas that we serve. And we found that Native Americans often had their own healers within that community. So although we thought we were providing a service to them that they did not have, in time we found out they were accessing services in their own way. And the only way we became successful in providing services within that community was to partner with the quote-unquote medicine men of that area or the chiefs of those tribes and build a relationship with them to build trust in order for those people to be willing to access services from us. Culture also greatly influences attitudes about physical contact. We tend to have a arm's length bubble around us as Americans, and when people come within that area, then they are thought to be either someone that is real close to you or they're having to do it for necessity. But it's important to note that in our interactions, because even we're a person that likes physical contact, maybe a hugger, and when we greet people, the way we show them that we trust them is hug them. If that's not culturally acceptable for the person that you're serving, that it would be to your benefit and to theirs also if you waited before you engaged in that type of touching behavior or physical behavior. In some cultures, when women go to the doctor, their husbands have to come in with them. They don't want to be seen without having their husband in the room with them. And you have to make different changes based on that. And this goes on and on and on. The more we study individual cultures, the more we learn what are those physical contact rules and what are those gender roles that are related to providing services. Some cultures may use different standards for loudness, speed, delivery, silence, attentiveness, and it's important for us to learn those. The best way that we can is through listening and research. But it's important to note that those differences exist. Now, the best way to understand culture is to, first of all, explore your own. When you know what holidays are important to you, what major events that you find irreplaceable and why they are so important to you, and how you would feel if someone told you could no longer be allowed to celebrate those, then you get a better insight when talking with somebody else, and you're able to build empathy and find out why those things are important to them as well. All of us being equal, the open-ended questions like this: how did they grow up? What is their worldview? How did gender shape their aspirations in life? And who they admire give you more insight into that person as an individual and their culture than knowing what their race may be or their ethnicity. You have to be open to sharing as well, because, as I said before, people from other countries they don't necessarily see us as individuals themselves. They see us as all Americans. So when you're willing to share and you're willing to learn, then you put yourself in a place where you can provide better services. The prevention system must be conscious of the inherent dynamic of interacting with cultures. This is a critical component in the design of the services that we deliver, and also having access to service delivery is not enough. How, where, and by whom the service is provided must also be considered. So cultural competence is that set of behaviors and attitudes that professionals use so you can understand, learn to value, adapt, and work effectively in cross-cultural situations. Cultural competency skills include being aware of your own culture, your own values, respecting differences between others, and the list continues. These are things that people as individuals are very capable of doing. Each and every one of you attending today, in sound of my voice, has the ability to be culturally competent and develop these skills. But you have to be flexible. We don't necessarily agree with the culture of others and don't necessarily understand it. So it requires us to educate ourselves. Never assume. I won't say what my parents told me when I grew up, but don't assume, because it makes out of you and me. And those assumptions are based on the person's appearance, and they also often lead to misjudgments. We may not hear what the youth and families have to say because we have already decided that they have nothing to contribute, and on our own biases relating to the person's appearance or situation. There's been a lot of challenges, and there will continue to be as long as people make assumptions. Does it have a purpose? Of course it does. From time to time, you find yourself assessing a situation and you make an assumption for safety. But when we automatically start assuming and our preconceptions start deciding and affecting our ability to communicate effectively with people, then we are essentially handicapping ourselves, and we're no longer able to provide services to the community, especially with prevention services. When you have different assumptions about a certain community, whether it be the drug community or whether it be who's a criminal and who's not a criminal, then it limits on who you're willing to reach out to. And a lot of times people, especially in urban neighborhoods, they look the way that they look because they're blending in with their community. They do it for reasons of safety, and it helps in building anonymity. But just because every kid, if you see a whole group of children and they're all dressed alike, doesn't mean that they all subscribe to the same values and beliefs. There may be some children in there that may steal. There's others that would never even consider taking something that didn't belong to themselves or even committing any type of violent act. But we have to be willing to reach out and talk with them as individuals as well as a group and find out how we can best serve a person, meeting them where they are. We often use labels or categories to describe others. And others leads to othering. And othering is a broadly exclusive conceptual framework that captures expressions of prejudice and behavior such as activism and tribalism, but is also a term that points toward a deeper process at work, only some of which are captured by those terms. And it is not uncommon for people of different religions to other on a regular basis. So although you may consider that you have two churches in town, and one is Baptist and one is Protestant, there may be othering that's occurring, and that may be the primary barrier from getting those churches to work together to decrease drug use within the community, because they're not willing to work with the other group. They've already labeled them and given them certain characteristics that they don't find acceptable. Grouping, on the other hand, is a natural human inclination. The problem is people often make assumptions about groups of people that they don't even know. So, labeling can lead to othering, and othering can lead to labeling. But either way, it causes division. Our next word is stereotyping. And stereotyping occurs when we use misinformation in order to judge everyone who belongs to a specific group. Stereotypes are the idea that everyone from a certain group shares the same characteristics. We can all think of stereotypes we've heard before, different races, about cultures, even about genders. The stereotypes don't just appear out of nowhere. They're based on ideas and experiences with certain groups, and then extended to apply to an entire group. The problem is that people don't function solely as members of that group. And we know this to be true about ourselves and our close friends. Most of us fit into different categories and have a variety of interests. We might like watching sports, but we're not all athletic. We don't want to actually play the sport. We might like rock and roll, but we may also listen to classical or rap or jazz. But when we think about other people, particularly people who are of a different race from us, we often have a harder time understanding the complexity. So we put people into categories, and thus stereotypes are formed. So many stereotypes are negative, such as assuming that certain people are lazy, certain people are criminals or poor. And some are seemingly positive, such as assuming that people are athletic, religious, or musically inclined. When I was growing up, if you saw a tall person, you stereotype they must be a basketball player. More often, we learn and no longer do this behavior because all tall people don't like to play basketball. Others are just neutral, such as assuming that people eat certain foods or share similar hobbies. Like if you walk into a restaurant and they decide before you even get the menu, oh, you want the fried chicken, or you probably want the sushi. It's not beneficial at all, and at worst, it can be harmful because it can hurt people on a personal basis, a personal level. So how do we avoid the stereotyping then? First of all, we acknowledge the existence of our own preconceptions. We have to do an inventory of our own feelings about different people of different cultures, and we have to be willing to challenge those. Just because we meet one person from a certain culture and they have certain habits or things that you may not find desirable, you can't put that on the whole group. And don't take for granted any opinion that just pops into your head. Be willing to challenge it. Also, work to understand how your preconceptions impact the way you view others, and know your labels and to whom you relegate them to. Most importantly, slow down and always be willing to get more information. So, have you ever been unfairly judged? And how did it make you feel? Just think about it. And with that feeling, know that we want to go forth from this training and into our other aspects of life in knowing that we will no longer unfairly judge others because we didn't like the way it made us feel as an individual. Culturally diverse individuals and communities in this time and day are overlapping. There's a disproportionate number of people within the criminal justice system. In Arkansas alone, where I'm at now, blacks represent only 12% of the population, but within the Department of Corrections, there are over 50% of the people incarcerated. Also, people are less likely to receive needed services. We have to become more culturally competent in order to provide more services to different people. Recently went to an event, an Islamic event within my community, to a school that I had no idea even existed, but I saw it pop up on Facebook as something that was going on in my area, and I went. I enjoyed the food, I enjoyed meeting new people, and I learned a lot about Islam as a culture as well as a religion, the Muslim religion. Also within the school system, you know, is that minorities are overrepresented in the special education classes. So we have to remove the stereotypes that are related to that. A lot of times people don't understand people from other communities, whether it even be the teachers or the system as a whole, and because of certain behaviors, they get routed to the special education classes, and in turn end up getting routed to the juvenile detention system as well, and then the Department of Corrections. So we have to address the disparities and the disproportionalities by becoming more culturally aware of individuals and what's going on within our communities. This is the cultural competence continuum, and in this continuum, we're able to see that there are different levels before you become culturally proficient. Cultural destructiveness is at the lowest level, and that's when your agency is discriminating. Cultural incapacity is when they understand that there are different cultures at work within the community that need services, but they just don't have the capacity. It'll be such as having like a increase in the number of Hispanics within your community, and you're providing services, but you don't have anything in your library that's bilingual, or anything in your school that's bilingual. Cultural blindness is being aware of it, not having the resources, so you're aware that you have the challenge, but then you decide, well, we're just going to be blind to it, ignore that the challenge exists, and we're not going to do anything about it. Cultural pre-competence is when you start to make the changes, you start thinking about it actively and researching what you need in order to become have a culturally competent system or program, and then at cultural competence level, you're implementing the things that you found there. And this is all can be seen illustrated in the SPIF. Then cultural proficiency is when you're able to operate at a proficient level over time, and you have a sustainability program in place so that even if the community starts to change, you're able to make the changes within your program or your system or organization so that you continue to meet the needs of a diverse population. So this is a short way of explaining where you're trying to get to with cultural competence. In essence, cultural competence of professionals is affected by the processes that shape your cultural identities, which are in turn influenced by your own worldviews and worldviews of your clients. The difference between the clients and the workers in any helping relationship cannot be ignored, but need to be brought to the forefront to develop trust and acceptance in the professional relationship. In order to reach that level of cultural competence, workers need to be aware of their own attitudes and their own beliefs and develop knowledge and skills to effectively work with clients from diverse backgrounds. So we're going to play a quick game, and I think that's all we're going to have time for. And these are the definitions. So the definitions are going to come out right here on the left. You'll see where it says stereotyping, cultural competency, etc. And you're going to decide when I show you the slide by reading the definition which word on the left applies to the definition you see on the right. And you can do that by in your chat box. So the first one, selected cultural and sometimes physical characteristics used to classify people into ethnic groups or categories, American ethnic groups, etc. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I can't see the answers. Am I supposed to be able to see what the people are chatting? Are they saying it?
Yeah, Derrick, you should see everyone in the chat box writing their answers.
In the chat box, okay. Let me switch over here to the chat box. Okay, that's better. Ethnicity. Good job, you guys. Good job. Our next one is occurs when we use misinformation to judge everyone who belongs to a specific group. 5, 4, 3, 2. I see the answers coming in, and you guys are correct. You are on it. Thank you for you are really paying attention today. Next one is one of 4 groups, either black, white, Indian, Alaskan, and Native American. Good job, everyone. Good job. Next is the belief in the inherent superiority of one sex gender over the other, and thereby the right to dominate. Okay, those came in very quickly. Very good. Next is the fear or hatred of aversion to prejudice and or discrimination against people who are homosexual. Okay, you guys didn't miss a second. Very good. And the belief that race is the primary determinant of human trait, capacity, and racial differences produce an inherent superiority. Excellent. The set of beliefs, behaviors, and interactional patterns that identify a person with a large social or ethnic group. Okay. Thank you for your participation. That is absolutely correct. Culture. And the ability to interact effectively with people of different cultures. Okay, I see a couple different answers there. The correct answer is cultural competency, or cultural competence. Excellent. So, our last, I'm going to have to go through our last part a little bit faster than I want to, but just in improving communications, first of all, I don't expect everyone to go out and learn a new language tomorrow, but you do need to be good listeners. You need to smile and look interested. Often it's our go-to to sort of like frown and squinch up when we're trying to understand somebody, but just a frown alone can communicate a message. But you need to be patient and listen carefully and don't interrupt. When you work with culturally diverse populations, learn culturally specific information. Learn at least a few words that family uses, and if you have to, be willing to use interpreters. And try to limit the forms that you use as well, because in working with those populations, English may not necessarily be the first language. And in sending forms or using forms, people may see that as a barrier. Some of the do's, and this is a whole list of them. You'll get a copy of the slide, so you'll get a chance to look at them. But most importantly, avoid the jargon and try to emphasize keywords. Some people know some keywords, but those jargon, it really gets in the way. English is complicated enough without us adding the little nuances that we've added along the way. And be careful of pronunciation. There are a lot of words that sound the same in English but mean something completely different. And try to stick with the main point. Keep pencil and paper handy and try to write down some key information. To become more culturally competent, a system or individual needs to value diversity. We talked about that in depth. And also try to develop some cross-cultural skills as well. Do your research and gain some knowledge of different cultures and practices, worldviews as well. Understand in the end, we all have cultural choice, and that is the freedom to choose and adapt the characteristics from one's own and other cultures in developing one's cultural identity. I'm from the African-American culture, but I love tacos, and I love being on the beach, and I'm a motorcycle rider as well. So which culture do I belong to? The MC, the motorcycle community, the Hispanic community? It's whatever I choose to be. In the end, I have that freedom. And here in the United States, we actively utilize that freedom. You have to know when it's appropriate to use the different patterns of each as well as you flow through and back and forth through different communities. In the end, and this is a quote I want to leave you with, culture does not change because we desire it to change. Culture changes when the organization is transformed, and the culture reflects the realities of people working together every day. And from Kofi Annan, from the former Secretary General of the United Nations, tolerance, intercultural dialogue, and respect for diversity are more essential than ever in a world where people are becoming more and more closely interconnected. And I'm going to stop right there. I hope I'm close to my time. And if you have any questions now, then I'll definitely be willing to answer them. Thank you.
Great.
Cultural choice, yes.
Thank you so much, Derrick. We just have a few minutes for questions if anyone does have a burning question. We've had some really great participation in the chat box today, a lot of wonderful discussion going on. I think this was a very timely topic, so we really do appreciate it. If anyone does have any questions, you can go ahead and stick them there in the chat box. If you think of one later on, we are, of course, happy to pass them along to Derrick as well. I will have Debbie send out a link to the PowerPoint one more time to make sure everyone has an opportunity to get that. Go ahead, Derrick. Were you saying something?
I saw one person asking about tools. I find Google Translator an excellent tool, even as I travel the world. They're constantly making updates to it. And it even allows, like, the person to speak into it, and then it translates it back to you so you can understand it. That's a tool that we can even use here in talking with people from other countries. It is limited to actual real vocabulary, so it's important to also note that everyone from different cultures and different languages around the world don't actually speak in the same vernacular that the tool uses, so it does have its limitations.
Great. And I do see a couple other questions I want to ask you really quickly. One person is asking you to speak about microaggressions. I think many of the points you were speaking of could be seen as microaggressions. Do you have any advice for dealing with those?
Well, a lot of those are hidden, and we have to be willing to challenge those microaggressions, because as we assimilate into different cultures and others try to assimilate into the mainstream culture, people have their own individual beliefs as well. It's usually easier to deal with it at a system level than at an individual level, because people are still very tied to how they feel about things, and feelings a lot of times is what encompasses what some of the microaggressions that occur.
Mm-hmm. The other question, I think we'll have this be our last question for today. What's your best advice for encouraging colleagues to be more culturally competent, to talking to others about how to be more culturally cognizant and culturally proficient?
I would say it starts, and we say with coworkers, with them actively sitting together and be willing to have a conversation facilitated by sometimes an outsider, to come in and challenge them to talk about how they really feel about their own culture and the challenges that they're having in working with other cultures, in order to brainstorm ideas and then ultimately develop policies that everyone has been involved in making. It can't be a policy that you see that's being implemented and you have to go along with it, but you need to have a part in it in helping that organization to change and become more culturally competent.
Great. Thank you so much, Derrick. I think we're going to have to stop questions now. We do have a few more final housekeeping to go over, so if everyone would hang out just a few more minutes. I want to thank you again, Derrick, for really a wonderful presentation today. We really appreciate you being here with us.
Thank you so much. I appreciate each and every one of you, and encourage you all to challenge yourselves, travel the world, meet somebody from a new country, and learn something new.
Great. Thanks, Derrick. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording, and then I'll go over some of our final housekeeping, including the CE. I'm getting a lot of questions. I'll go over that in just a moment.